adjusting my screen to include.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Ranching 101. We are really excited you could join us today. I'm Tyler Schuster, and I work in events and education. And we just want to give you a few reminders before we get started. Our annual Cattle Raisers Convention and Expo is March 25th through 27th, and registration is now open. You can register at cattleraisersconvention.com. It is the largest ranching expo in the Southwest with over 4,500 attendees and 250 exhibitors. And so we hope you can join us for that. Our next Ranching 101 is going to be February 15th at 1 p.m. and it's going to be genetics in action. So hopefully building off this and what we're going to learn today some. We are now going to hear a video from our sponsor, Lone Star Ag Credit. We'll start that over real quick. Amelia, if you can unmute yourself so we can hear it. Okay, this should work this time. Let's try.
My name is Jason Jones and I work for Lone Star Ag Credit. Our mission is to help rural America. It's here to help the farmers, the ranchers, the part-time farmers, the guys wanting to buy recreational land. If we do our job right, we keep the rural communities running. The farmers, the ranchers we're financing, they're putting money into local grocery stores, into the tire companies. In the big picture, we're keeping everything moving for our rural communities to keep them alive.
So now we're excited to have Leoma Wells join us for Ranching 101 this month, and we're going to turn it over to her. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to send them in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we were going to do our best to make sure all questions get answered. But thanks for joining us.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Tyler said, I am Leoma Wells. I am the strategic account manager for Neogen Genomics that works out of Lincoln, Nebraska. I also own Data Genie LLC, which is a data management and consulting company. So I work with seed stock producers and commercial cattlemen such as yourselves every single day. I am going to share a little bit about myself when we get this kicked off so that you have a better idea of my history. But I worked for a breed association for 12 years, and that was wonderful to gain a lot of experience in these areas. And I worked for an association where we were very rooted in our passion for heterosis and crossbreeding. And so starting out your 2022, we want to talk about when you're going out and making those purchasing decisions this year, how can we best harness heterosis to benefit your herd and truly bring you into 2022 and all the tools that you have available to select those bulls. This photo, I live in Bozeman, Montana, took this photo out in central Montana. You can see there's a lot of sagebrush. Those of you on the call who kind of lived through your drought situation back in 2011, 2012, we're in a very similar situation up here in Montana. Unfortunately, we are praying for rain, moisture, snow, anything that we can get. Our stocking rates are down. So just wanted to share with you that the big sky country could use all those hopes and prayers. So kicking off, big picture and proven. I like to say this because proven in 2022, we all know folks say rely on the science. Well, I rely on science. Crossbreeding has been shown to be that effective tool that can really impact your bottom line as a cow-calf producer, okay? So one of your greatest costs is typically replacing your females. So when females come up open and not capitalizing on that fertility and stability and increased herd health that can come from a crossbreeding program. So this comes from Dr. Weber. He has quite a few white papers out there. He's passionate about crossbreeding. If you want access to some of those papers, let me know. But I just wanted to start out by saying the big picture is everything we're going to talk about today is proven. So definitions, some things you're going to hear me talk about would be heterosis. I know we can all read, so I'm not going to read these out loud to you. You can go back and freeze frame. You might also have your own definition of what this means to you, but these are defined by the professionals. One thing I want you to hone in on is the difference between heterosis and breed complementarity. Okay, these two get used interchangeably and they're not quite the same thing. So when you're selecting a bull, you can select via breed complementarity. So let's say that you have an Angus-based cow herd and you really want to inject some of that, maximizing that hybrid vigor. You're going to use a breed on your Angus heifers that's known to kind of, cover up some of those weaknesses that we find within the Angus breed. So you're going to go out and seek out what's going to cross well. And that's why we don't necessarily, see a lot of crosses between, let's say Hereford and Simmental would be one that I wouldn't necessarily cross every day. Now, if you cross those, no judgment. Let's just maybe dive into why that is. So let's choose breeds that are complementary to each other. It's slightly different than heterosis is defined. EPDs, expected progeny differences. If you're not familiar with these, we're going to walk through those a little bit later on in the slide deck. And Jake is going to talk about those in your February webinar as well. Last but not least, a less familiar term for you is molecular breeding values. And so molecular breeding values, that is the estimation of an individual's genetic potential, right? And so we're just looking at the genetics and what they have contained within their DNA. So it's not based on any phenotype, pedigree, any of that sort of information. And I should add, Tyler said this at the beginning. If you want to type in questions and, into the chat, we'll try to answer those as we go through this, because I very much want this to be a conversation, not just, me sitting up here lecturing. So in an ideal world, we would all utilize at least a 3-breed rotational cross to truly achieve that optimizing heterosis, or a 4-breed rotational cross. I say ideal, and I just sighed, you could hear it, because management, labor, resources, whether you have the pasture, whether you have the cow battery to make this pay at your bottom line is always a question. So I say that in an ideal world, we would all be able to utilize, the 3-breed or 4-breed crosses, but we don't live in an ideal world. We live in the real world. And so we're at the mercy of what our management, labor, and pasture limitations allow us to do. And so when we're walking through these things, I would say that the most often we see is a 2-breed, where people are crossing one breed with another breed and then keeping the F1s, potentially bringing another breed in. But if you were going to go back and go to the ideal, this is what you would need to research. But we don't live in an ideal world, and the people that I consult with every day rely on what we can do. So my first question to you all on this call, and you don't have to answer this, but think about this and maybe write jot yourself some notes, is what is your market? Because at the end of the day, all of us rely on selling beef, right? Like there are calves that need to go to market. If you are marketing replacement heifers and or bulls, you need to know who your customer is. So how do you establish your customer and what they truly need? Not what you want to produce. That wasn't the question. I didn't say, go and choose what you want to produce. What is your market and what's your target market? And how do we choose breeds that best complement those goals and aspirations to evolve through this? So the first step you always want to do is research. Talk to folks in your area who are doing it successfully. Speak to them about the breeds that they're using. Do they work well for the environment? Can you bring in something that's a little bit more exotic and be successful? These are all questions to research and start benchmarking where you're at today. Value-added programs. I have up on the screen Superior Livestock Auction, based down there out of Fort Worth. We happen to partner with them on a genetic value-added program. There are many value-added programs out there, such as Black Hide, NHTC, GAP, We Care. I mean, the list is endless. But do you have the potential to capture some of those premiums in the marketplace based upon the genetics that you are choosing to invest in? I already touched on select breeds that work well in your environment. That is key to success. If you came and picked out some cows from my herd up here in Montana and trucked them down to Texas, would they be successful? I don't know. I would hope so, but maybe you need a little bit more heat tolerance. Your Western, Eastern, Southeast regions are vastly different. So we have to ask ourselves, are we choosing the right genetics for our environment so that we can really capitalize on those genetics? You also need to find reputable seed stock sources. This is an uncomfortable conversation for some folks to have because, maybe grandpa has bought bulls from the same gentleman for 25 years and, you're really comfortable where you're at. But we have to ask ourselves, is that seed stock source the best source to maximize our, bottom line? Are they bringing profit into our herds? And I think one thing that we can all agree on is if you go walk through someone's cows and you're buying genetics from that individual, ranch, you're unknowingly or knowingly following what their cattle look like and what their cattle have the genetic potential. So if you're buying bulls from a source and you don't like his cows, well, if you're retaining replacements, that might be an issue. So just something to consider when you're, out interviewing your seed stock providers. These are all things that I would be asking. Last but not least, if you're marketing calves through a local sale barn, I would encourage you to get with your sale barn, find out if there are different, times of the year, maybe that you can sell, or they maybe have feature sales. Let's get creative and let's think outside the box, because at the end of the day, if you're taking the time to invest and be on these webinars and learn more about that bottom line, let's realize it. So your outlet for your calves is key to that success. I like to bring up this slide because how do you pick the bull that's best for you? And this is a trick question, because the bull that's best for you and that you like out of this pen may not be the same bull that I like. And that's the beauty of going to a seed stock provider, is typically they have about 200 bulls for you to choose from, or 100. And you and your neighbor might come out of this pen and have a notepad, and you might have a few that, overlap, but more than likely the 5 that you love visually and want to go back and take a look at, if they would work for your herd, might not be the same ones that your neighbor likes. So keep in mind, picking the best bull is really personal, because you're going to have your goals. You're going to have your visual, like if you really like black bulls and you don't want to look at reds, obviously that one right there in the front's out. If you are a red bull buyer, well, it looks like you have a little bit fewer options in this particular pen, but I'm sure we can find you one. So take into consideration these factors when you go look at bulls. And I want you to have an idea of what your genetic budget is stepping into any bull sale. Sometimes I watch emotional decisions drive purchases. So if a gentleman shares with me that his bull budget's $5,000 and his neighbor up the road, who, they kind of go back and forth, bids him up, he might end up paying $7,000 for that bull. And was that bull truly worth, that genetic investment when he had set in his mind that he was only going to spend X amount? So have a great idea, pick a number, and try to stick to that budget as much as possible. So what tools do we have that help you besides just looking at the bulls? So once you went out into that pen and you've, written down your short list, where am I going to send you? As a commercial buyer, I am going to share with you that your key to really shortening that list of 10 bulls that you like down to 5 bulls that would work for your operation lies in EPDs. As I mentioned, your February webinar is going to be quite a bit of this, so I won't dive too deep into the weeds, but I wanted to share with you that prior to genomics being introduced, we calculated EPDs based upon pedigree, phenotype, and progeny information. So while folks think that there's a black box out there that these go into, it's all based on, on realized data. When we introduced genomics in 2009, we took that to the next level. And so then not only did we have pedigree, phenotype, and progeny information, we suddenly had genomic information, which we could scan and take a look at the SNP markers that we know affect traits such as birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, heifer pregnancy. We can look at those and we can say, if these traits are present, here's how we know that that works in the population. So that led to breeds coming out with what we call a GEEBD, which is a fancy word for genomic enhanced expected progeny differences. So we're able to dive into what's underneath the hide and help you as a bull buyer make an even more educated decision. If EPDs overwhelm you, or if you feel like, you don't quite know where to start with them, I would encourage you to reach out to an extension agent, reach out to us at Neogen, as territory managers, your TSCRA representatives, and we can go through those details with you to make you more comfortable with using EPDs, because this is a tool that will help you differentiate and pull apart your genetic decisions. So when I say the EPDs are a tool, that's how we view them. Okay. I brought up this example because Bull A is a well-used AI sire, and Bull B is a yearling bull. And so Bull A is not going to be offered at your yearling bull sale that you're going to, go pick them off the shelf. But this really highlights the difference between accuracy levels, which is not often printed in your sales catalogs, unfortunately. Some folks are starting to print the percentile rankings, and which that is really helpful information, but you would have to go to your breed association website to look up accuracies. Why does this matter to you as a bull buyer? So when you're looking at harnessing heterosis and deciding which breeds to use, accuracy helps you from a standpoint of accuracy increases your confidence that the numbers displayed on that animal are more likely, going to fall within that range. And so I circled birth weight because this is a common question we get asked at bull sales, is what was the bull's actual birth weight? And I'm here to share with you a better question is, what is that bull's birth weight EPD, which has his actual birth weight calculated into it, against his contemporary groups, and a contemporary group. I didn't mean to add an S onto that. So how was he at in comparison to his contemporary group? And along with that, what do we know about his pedigree information that could calculate into this birth weight? So if I shared with you that Bull A was, 94 pounds and Bull B was 96 pounds, you might look at me like I'm crazy, because if you look at their birth weight EPDs, obviously Bull A is considered to be a Cavionese bull, and Bull B is a little bit higher on the spectrum with that 4.4 birth weight. They weighed very similar at birth themselves. But what the question you didn't ask me was, what part of the country were both of these bulls from? And so we all know that, sometimes there's different regions of the country that have a little bit more birth weight because they can take that on. And so birth weight EPDs factor in contemporary groups, and the environment kind of, helps account for the environment. So do me a favor. And when you're going to a bull sale, start looking at this birth weight EPD instead of the actual birth weight. I'm not telling you to ignore the actual birth weight, but you can definitely ask questions around, around these types of things. One thing you will notice is on the Simmental website, they print their possible change for EPDs. And this is solely for commercial cow-calf producers and your benefit. Because as you can see with Bull B, his possible change is plus basically 2 pounds. Let's round that up a little bit. So what that tells you is that 66% of the time, his birth weight is going to fall between 2 pounds and 2 pounds and 6.4. So 2.4 and 6.4 pounds. If you wanted to go up to a 95% confidence, I could confidently tell you that his calves were going to be between, 0.4 and 8.4. Why is this important to you when you're deciding what bull to buy? If you don't check your cows at night or during calving, or maybe, you don't live close to where they're pastured, what is that risk to you? And what are you taking on as risk if he happened to have, a +8 on birth weight? And when I say +8, that's 8 pounds, above breed average. So these are factors to consider. And other EPDs vary by breed of what gets published. It is important to note, you could not take Simmental EPDs and directly compare them to Angus, or you could not take Hereford EPDs and directly compare them to Angus. All of the breeds are on different base levels for EPDs. And so keep that in mind in your bull selection, especially if you're wanting to harness what breeds complement your current cow herd. There is a tool via US Mark that you can input a breed EPD and ask it to calculate it, back to a different breed EPD so that you could directly compare. But the easiest thing is just to focus on your percentile rankings. For each breed, they have these, and that will allow you to rank the bulls in comparison to their breed populations. Please reach out to me if you have questions on this, because I feel as though we get a little lost in translation sometimes, but this is a very big key to your bull buying success, I promise. So how do genomics specifically help you as a bull buyer? Well, if I showed you a catalog and showed you these two bulls, once again, birth weight's an easy one for me to use. And they both said that they were -1.7. So on average, their calves are going to weigh, 1.7 pounds less than breed average. You would say, great, I can go home with either bull A or bull B. However, when we checked the website, we did see that bull A had been genomically enhanced and bull B had not. So the accuracy levels are different. I can have greater confidence, and down there in that range on that graph down there, you can see, I can have greater confidence bidding on bull A that he is going to be more close with that -1.7, -1.7 than bull B. Bull B's range is still out there. So I think that the graphical representation for me shows you, bid with confidence. And if your seed stock source is not utilizing genomic testing, it's a little less confidence for you, a little more risk. So why am I talking about all of this? And why does your bull purchasing decision this year matter? Marty Ropp from Allied Genetic Resources says it best. The bulls that you are purchasing today, turning out with females this year, they're going to have their first calves in 2023. Those first heifers are going to get bred in 2024. Your first daughters out of this bull are going to calve in 2025. If you use that same pasture bull for 5 years, so if you use him for 5 years, that takes us to 2028. If he does what he's supposed to do and produces females that stay within your herd to really make you money, guess what? In 2038, you're going to have 10-year-old cows out of a bull that you selected this year. So maybe we should use all of these tools at our disposal to really make the best genetic investments that we can and start selecting, breeds that really complement one another so that we can harness that heterosis. Because in 2038, your future self will thank you for doing all of that investigation this year. Sometimes we like to say short-term. In the beef business, we don't have the luxury of short-term. This is where we're at. So when you're out there choosing your bull this year, keep that 2038 date in the back of your mind, because you are choosing genetics that will impact your herd for years to come. So am I forgetting all about the cows? Absolutely not. One of the things that was in my previous life was I directed a cow herd roundup project where we received more genomics on cows, because we realized while folks were testing their bulls and making great genetic decisions based around bulls, that was only half of the genetic material going into the calves. And so if you're sitting there as a commercial cow-calf producer, what tools can I offer you in 2022 that can help make those decisions? And the answer is, we have a commercial genomic tool, just like we had that seed stock tool that, you put in pedigree, phenotype, and progeny information. We can do a pretty decent job just by looking at the genotype on your commercial heifer. And so what does that mean? That means that we go in and we take a look at the genetics that that female has, and we assign her what we call the molecular breeding value scores. So the 1 through 10 scores, you're able to suddenly rank your heifers and benchmark them. Okay. You are able to have a snapshot in time of the genetic investments that you made and how those shook out in the heifers that you are retaining. Why does that matter? Because maybe you have the ability to manage those heifers differently than you would didn't have that knowledge. That's why it matters. Maybe you can pick a bull, if you have a set of heifers that need the marbling increased, that the marbling came back and you're like, oh, it's a little low. And my calf buyer says that I really need to bump up my marbling. Maybe you can turn those heifers out with a bull that's really high for marbling, and some other traits that might be effective on crossing with them. So if we don't know, we can't make those decisions. If we choose to know, we can make better management decisions and manage around those genetics. And really, when we're picking those bulls, pick bulls that are going to be effective for what we can do today. So you might ask, what's that look like? That's our identity beef profile that we return. I got to put in a little plug for Neogen here. We do this and we do this really well. We partnered with IGS, which is a multi-breed genetic evaluation with over 20 million animals. And we always go back to actual data to validate. And I can tell you that this is an excellent tool for after you've made your phenotypic sort on your heifers. Use this identity beef. You'll receive back your scores and you can make that final sort to really choose heifers that will align with the goals of your operation and where you want to be. Since we're talking about heterosis, we have a test, shocker, and it's called InVigor. It accounts for the ability to measure heterosis in your female herd. So if you have F1s and you cross back to a purebred bull, what percentage of which half did that calf inherit? Because it's not all equal parts once you start getting into crossing. So our InVigor tool lets you evaluate your heifers to see, did they capture that heterosis? What's their score like? It's a $5 add-on if we start talking about costs. And I think it's very worthwhile, especially if you have made quite a few crosses over the years. You might be shocked at the results. All of this technology in 2022 leads us to be able to have more targeted selection decisions. And if your seed stock providers are embracing the genomic tools, ask yourself how you as a commercial cattleman can start to capitalize on those tools as well in your operations, because it is more critical. I get a little choked up when I talk about this, and my apologies. It is more critical than ever before that we are asking ourselves the questions of how can we get more pounds per cow exposed, across the scales? How can we make sure that the feedlot buyers are getting the traits from us that they want to get? How can we make sure that every piece of this chain down to the consumer experience is a good one? And the answer in that is the genetic choices that you're making today. That's how we get there. And so utilize the tools, know what they mean, know how they could be advantageous. And I want to thank you for all of your time. And I would like to take questions, open this up for, discussion. Feel free, if I can't answer your questions today, you can reach out after. I think Tyler's offered to put her email, or your email is probably on the website, Tyler, and you can email in questions. If you're watching the replay and you want specific questions answered, this is how we all learn, and this is how we get better, and this is how we pull together. So Tyler, with that, I see that there is a chat. What's a good percentage or baseline investment to make on our own herd genomics? So I think, as I mentioned, the beauty of our industry is that everyone's targets are different and everyone's benchmarks are different. I had a gentleman test his heifers. He tested 100 heifers, and he had shared with me that he wasn't going to keep any heifers that fell below a 5 for stability, on his commercial score. And when we got the results back, he needed to keep 75 heifers, and there was more than 25 heifers that fell below the 5. So we had to move his benchmark back for that first year, right? Because focused genetic breeding means establishing what your benchmark is today and progressively increasing that so that your needle moves. I'm sure you know that when you ask the question. So establish what you want your benchmarks to be, and potentially use the tools such as genetic testing to tell you where you're at today, and then select bulls that will move that needle for you. And if you commit to, culling the bottom 25% every year of those heifers, or the bottom 10%, whatever that looks like for your operation, I promise you your needle will move toward whatever you're selecting for. This is a double-edged sword. Make sure you're not single trait selecting. So, I've had some folks go down some rabbit holes and fairly quickly, because some traits are highly heritable. And so just keep that in mind when you are benchmarking, is that selecting one trait might also affect a different trait. Let's see. Okay. I was going to say.
Well, if anybody does have any questions after this, or you think of something you wish you would have asked, please feel free to email us at education@tscra.org, and we will get you in contact with Leoma. And this is just a reminder that Jake Trout from Neogen is going to be with us next month talking about Genetics in Action, February 15th at 1 p.m. And it's going to be something great right before bull buying season to talk about. And so we hope you'll join us. If you have any questions about future webinars as well, please feel free to reach out and email us. And thank you for joining us, and have a great one.
Thank you for having me.